Enoch was an expanded story of the mysterious giants, the sons of God, and the daughters of the earth, spoken of in Genesis chapter 6.
Anytime you read the book of Genesis, there are all kinds of unanswered questions. Suddenly, there is this quick few verses at the beginning of the flood story about giants in the land that come from the sons of God mixing with the daughters of the earth. And you stop and think, wait a minute, what's this all about? It's like it went by too fast. And you want to grab it and say, wait a minute, what was this?
They taught them charms and enchantments, and they became pregnant and bare great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. When men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. Enoch chapter 7.
That these angels have crossed over this boundary that they shouldn't have. They were spiritual beings and they were to remain as such. When they decided to descend upon earth, this unleashed upon the earth.
But light. It was not our place to interfere. Yet we chose to try and help mankind. And when we disobeyed the Creator, He punished us. We were encrusted by your world. Rock and mud shackled our fiery glow.
Strength of 200 men, the fortitude of a Roman army. Legends, myths, and ancient folklore tell powerful tales of giants that held up the heavens and walked the earth.
In so many cultures, there seems to be that little grit of sand that there was a giant species once roaming the earth or the locality, and it's around that grit that the pearl of the legends of the giants has formed itself.
Regardless of race, region, religion, or age, every society has created legends about giants as a way to help explain the unknown.
In cases where large formations are found or bones are discovered that can't be explained or giant footprints, it's very common to imagine a race of giants that walked the earth and left those remains.
Now, modern historians and archaeologists will look at that and scratch their head and go, we don't have any clue. How in the world did somebody quarry that rock? How did they carve that rock? How did they move that rock? Nobody can understand that when you're trying to look at it with that frame of mind. 6 foot tall guy. Looking at our resources today, we couldn't move something that big.
Baalbek in particular is a very good example. That has the trilithon. Those are the largest stones in the world ever used for construction. They're so large we don't even know their actual weight. Those stones were somehow quarried, moved 5 miles, lifted 25, 30 feet in the air, and placed together so closely that you can't fit a razor blade or a piece of paper in between them. We have no idea how they did it. We don't have a crane in the world that can lift weights anywhere near what those things are.
But if we let the Scriptures speak for us, I believe this solves the problem. Amos 2:9. God describes the Amorites. Yet I destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedar trees, like the height of the cedars. And he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots from beneath. Cedar trees start at 35 feet and go up to 150 feet. The cedars of Lebanon, we're in Baalbek, Lebanon, where they're known for their cedar trees. Amos describes the giants, the Amorites. So I scaled Arnold Schwarzenegger up to a 35-foot person, 36-footer, and there's what you got. You imagine 2 guys like Arnold, strong as the oaks, right? Now, that's pretty easy to see how that rock was moved. Hey, Arnold, stop flexing. Get over here and give me a hand. Stop showing off for the camera. I need some help here. That totally explains the megalithic structures all around the world. Let the Scripture speak for itself. It tells you there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. That being before the flood, yes, and also after the flood as well. Josephus, historian, also describes giants. They were, till then, left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. These were horrific creatures. Josephus writes about these as a historian in the 1st century. And he actually says that the bones of these men are still on open display in his day. So apparently they had a little museum of the conquered giants the Israelites wiped out. Here's the bones of the giants right here for everybody to see. All post-flood giants in the Bible are referred to as offspring of other giants found in the lineage of Canaan, Mizraim, Cush, and possibly Japheth. And I put in parentheses there Gog and Magog. I can't confirm this from Scripture. I don't have scriptural confirmation for this. However, historically speaking, there's a lot of evidence that Gog and Magog were giants. In fact, every year they have what's called the Lord Mayor Parade in the UK, where they march these two huge giants called Gog and Magog through the cities. Two big giants.
Well, Gog and Magog, one of the most familiar sights at any Lord Mayor show for many, many years. Traditional guardians of the City of London, they've been carried at the Lord Mayor show since 1554.
I stood on the Great Wall of China in 2006. Come to find out that the original name for the Great Wall of China was the Ramparts of Magog. And so when you stand on this massive wall, I mean, this thing's huge and it goes on forever. That's not just to keep out Joe Blow's 6-footer out. It makes sense that they may have been trying to keep out a whole bunch of, 35-footers maybe, or whatever. But there's evidence that Gog and Magog may have indeed been giants.
Well, did you know the Great Wall of China wasn't always so great?
What should we do?
Okay, Nephilim 101, real quick. When men began to increase number on the earth, daughters were born to them. Sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful. They married many of them they chose. The Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever. He's mortal. His days will be 120 years. Nephilim on the earth in those days, and also afterward. And also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them. And also afterwards means what? Thank you. We cleared that up real quick. And the angels who did not keep their position of authority but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, there's a linguistic tie here, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer punishment of eternal fire. Another incursion of 10 spies, I've actually looked at all the translations. Basically, it's this. Something is going on. Go down to the English Standard. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from a Nephilim. And we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers. And so we seem to them. King James, last one. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were on our own sight as grasshoppers, and so were we in their sight. Let's go back here. Go down to the last sentence. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of men and had children by them. What's happening here is the unthinkable. Fallen angels are procreating with the women of earth, and they're creating hybrid beings, known as the Nephilim.
So we see these equations in Scripture, and using those, we can correctly identify that these were all hybrids. They were half man and half demon. Now, concerning the Amorites, God told the people, don't you worry. His angel would go before you, Moses says, before you and bring you into the Amorites. And I will cut them off. You shall not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their works. But you shall utterly overthrow them and completely break down their sacred pillars. Remember, God told the Israelites to destroy the 7 nations of Canaan. Man, woman, child, beast, everything. Is that a very nice God? Well, it all depends. Depends what kind of creatures he told them to destroy. If they're simply human, like you and I, it seems a bit capricious, doesn't it? It almost seems like the God that Richard Dawkins has in mind. But if we have some hybrids living in the land, now it begins to make sense. Because these people were not just mean and wicked, but they were genetically impure. They were a mix between demons and humans. And now it comes into focus. We find that the Amorites were still in the land in the time of the Judges. From the passage, do not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. So this is in the time of Judges. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the hill country. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. Well, that was true. But the thing is, they were supposed to rely on God's angel, more than likely, referring to Jesus, to do the work for them and to have him supply their power. And they go on in Numbers 13. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. Now, God confirms that they are not exaggerating. God says, yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars. And he was as strong as the oaks, yet I destroyed his fruit above and his roots beneath. So, I don't think God is one to exaggerate, personally. And God is saying that neither were the spies exaggerating. Their sin was not trusting in him. It wasn't because they were exaggerating. Nobody accused them of exaggerating. Come on, guys, they're not really that tall. I mean, so they're 7 feet, I'm sure we can take them. No, he wasn't saying that. He's saying they're like the heights of the cedars. Now, this is very significant because God uses this one other time in Scripture. In Job 40. He says, look now at the behemoth which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. See now his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. I talk about this in the first 6 days, if you're interested. But this is a very good description of a sauropod dinosaur. And probably the sauropod dinosaur that we have in mind here is the Diplodocus, because that had a tail 46 feet long. That's a very good description of a cedar tree, I would say. So considering that cedar trees could grow anywhere from 40 to 80 feet tall, that's a pretty good description. So what God is doing is he's confirming that the Amorites, who were equal to the Nephilim, were of great stature. And they probably really were like grasshoppers. These guys weren't just saying that, oh, I felt so small compared to these guys. No, they really did. They were small compared to these guys. And so we should not underestimate what they're saying. Now, Moses talks about King Og of Bashan specifically. He says, only he remained of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth, and the cubit of a man. According to the Oxford Dictionary, ancient measure of length derived from the forearm, varying at different times and places, but usually 18 to 22 inches. The Roman cubit was 17.4, the Egyptian 20.64. Now, Tim Lovett, who's an expert on ancient shipbuilding, he was investigating the Ark of Noah, and he did extensive research, and he found that the shortest cubit was the Greek short cubit, 14 inches, and among the longest were the Persian royal cubit of 25.2 inches, and the Arabic hashimi of 25.56 inches. Now, obviously, the Greek, Persian, and the Arabic cubits don't count because we're talking about the days of Moses, and these, of course, are much, much later. So the only one that fits is the Egyptian royal cubit. Stephen tells us that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. So this would make sense. Moses had just come out of Egypt. He was a prince in the Pharaoh's house. He's going to use, the standard. If you go somewhere, you'll probably continue to use feet because that's what you know. And so Moses is going to use the Egyptian royal cubit. So that Egyptian royal cubit was 20.63 inches. And with that in mind, we can now put it into our own calculations, which would make his bed 15 feet 6 inches, and its width 6 feet 10 inches. So, and of course it was made of iron. It's not just some guy with a big ego, but because it was made of iron, it means that he was very heavy. And so he's probably a little bit shorter. He's probably about 15 feet tall. And when we begin to look at that, here's modern man, and there's Goliath, and we have the Irish giant of 12 feet, and then King Og, who's 15 feet. Putting them next to each other, you can see how you'd be somewhat intimidated next to this guy. And according to God, the Amorites were even taller. So, remember, King Og is just of the remnant of the Rephaim. He's not even the big guy. So, watch out. And how heavy was he? Well, thanks to Galileo and his equation he came up with, we can calculate his weight. So he was about 3,125 pounds. And he, probably could lift his own body weight, I'm sure, maybe double that. So he could probably lift at least 2 horses at the same time with a rider and throw them. Probably a mid-sized car of today. You'd want to watch out if this guy's in your path. And he said it was a land that devours its inhabitants because everybody was of great stature. Well, we can also calculate his basal metabolic rate. That means just the amount of calories needed to keep his heart beating, to stay alive, just the basics. He needed at least 22,657 calories every day just to stay alive. That's not even talking about normal activity. You can only guess what he would have needed for normal activity. That's just his very basic is equal to 9 normal-sized persons. We convert that into pizzas. You've got 12 12-inch pizzas, or 63 cheeseburgers, and probably a lamb every 2 days. So if he was really working out and stuff and going to war, he may have needed a lamb every day, or maybe 2 lambs a day. It was a land that devoured its inhabitants. You can see why these guys needed to go. And you can see why the spies were somewhat tenuous to go and take the land. But again, trust in the Lord, not yourself. Josephus confirms that they were of great size, for which reason they removed their camp to Hebron. And when they had taken it, they slew all the inhabitants. There were till then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenances so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, unlike any credible relations to other men. So, just kind of looking at the data that we've seen so far, Nephilim and all the other names that are in Scripture for them were the offspring of a demon father with a human mother. No evidence that the Nephilim came about as a result of the good boys hooking up with the bad girls, the daughters of Cain. That's just fantasy. Every anti-Nicene interpreter, Jewish and Christian, understood that the sons of God to be angels who had sexual relations with women, and the offspring of these relationships were the Nephilim. So if that was happening in that day, when Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now very quickly we're going to look at just some evidence of some modern giants. Now I know that there's all kinds of stuff floating around on the internet, a lot of Photoshop stuff. So I was very careful to stay away from that kind of speculative evidence. And so I found this picture, which was taken from the Strand magazine, reprinted in C.F. Wood Martin's 1901 book. So it's not Photoshop. You can go and check it out yourself. There's no Photoshop involved here. And he says that the London and North Western Railway Company's Broad Street Goods Depot, and a photograph of which is reproduced here, this monstrous figure is reputed to have been dug up by Mr. Dyer whilst prospecting for iron ore in County Antrim in Ireland. The length 12 feet 2 inches, girth of chest 6 feet 6 inches, and length of arms 4 feet 6 inches. There are 6 toes on the right foot. Took half a dozen men and a powerful crane to place this article of lost property in position for Strand magazine artists. And we also have the New York Tribune, 1909. You can go online and you can look at newspaperarchive.org, and you can look at these microfiche copies of these newspapers for yourself. Ixtapalapa, a town 10 miles southeast of Mexico City, there had been discovered what was believed to be the skeleton of a prehistoric giant of extraordinary size. The skeleton of a human being that is estimated to have been about 15 feet high. Then from France, in a prehistoric cemetery recently uncovered in Montpellier, France, while workmen were excavating a waterworks reservoir, human skulls were found measuring 28, 31, and 32 inches in circumference. The bones that the workmen discovered were also of gigantic proportions. One of the scientists engaged in examining the skeletons says they belong to a race of men who stood between 10 and 15 feet in height. So we've seen that the sons of God were fallen angels, that they came. Jude and Peter confirm that. And the daughters of Adam and the union with the sons of God created this human-demonic hybrid. They were also known as Gegenes or Gigantes in the Greek, which means from the earth. These were the famous men of the ancient world. Chances are, a lot of those Greek myths that we hear about have a kernel of truth in them. It may be bigger than we think. And all the ancient sources believe these to be the sons of humans and of demons. We saw King Og was about 15 feet, roughly 3,100 pounds. It was truly a land that devoured its inhabitants. So, the final attempt to corrupt the image of God. We've looked at what God did in the beginning, how He created us, how Adam fell, the genetics of the incarnation, how that happened sort of on the mechanics of what happened there. And now we see what is coming in our days. And first of all, we always start with Scripture, because that's where you have to start. In Daniel 2:43 it says, "And you saw iron, as you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed." So there's some important things to notice here. They will mingle. This is in Aramaic in this case, mitarvin, which means it's a reflexive verb. It's a reflexive verb. It means that they're going to do something to themselves. Kind of like when you bathe yourself or you cut yourself. You are both the subject, you're the one doing it, and you're also the recipient, you're the object of the verb. So whoever these guys are, they are going to mingle themselves with the seed of men. So that already gives us a clue that we're looking at two dissimilar natures.
The latter days, in part, will be distinguishable because of the rise of powers that have been suppressed or repressed over the years, but in the latter days those powers will emerge once again. And one of our favorite verses has to do with some of the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, starting in verse 36, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." And what he's saying here is the days of Noah will be sort of transplanted into the latter day era. And you and I both believe we're seeing that right now.
Absolutely. One of the, in my opinion, we're looking at the return of the Nephilim. It's a different incursion than what happened thousands and thousands of years ago. I call it the coming great deception. And what we're going to see is, or what we are seeing, is this manifestation of orbs and craft and other phenomena, other anomalies. Meanwhile, shows like the History Channel's Ancient Aliens program is promulgating what I call the coming great deception. They're saying that E.T. created all life on this planet, that they genetically manipulated all life on this planet, that they started the world's civilizations and religions, and now are coming back at this critical juncture in human history.
It is curious where the trail can begin to lead when looking at ancient bloodlines. When talking about the word Nephilim, what we're dealing with is a little bit deeper and darker and larger in scope than giantism, a really tall guy, or your favorite basketball player. The term Nephilim became synonymous with giants because that's what they tended to be. It is by no means limited to that meaning. In fact, the word Nephilim is more of an umbrella term for the hybrid children, creatures of any high strangeness, which are actual flesh and blood, biological products of the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the fallen angels.
Have been stripped of their apparel. They go naked, and they have horrible faces.
This is a quote from an early Jewish writing called the Book of the Cave of Treasures. It tells of fallen angels and their bastard children called the Nephilim. God destroyed the Nephilim's bodies and doomed them to wander the earth in an invisible dimension, and they are still terrifying men. In our modern paradigm, they are known as demon spirits. The word demon is from the Greek language and implies a supernatural knowledge. This demon knowledge is superior to our own knowledge. The Bible tells of their creation in Genesis chapter 6, and they were the cause of the destruction of life on earth. The Apocrypha and early Jewish writings expound on these evil spirits. The book of Enoch tells of their giant stature and how they manipulated the genetics of man and animals in every imaginable way. In other words, no stone was left unturned in their evil experiments.
Sinned against the animals, what does that mean? Sinned against the animals is a reference to genetic manipulation, which created the animal-human hybrids of mythology, which appears to have also made a way for the disembodied spirits. Remember we talked about that the demons, where they came from, they're the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, to have host bodies to once again inhabit, thus bringing about their return. Dr. Judd Burton has become a good friend of mine in recent months. I just met him. I've had him on my radio show a few times, and we talk by phone quite a bit. He's written an extraordinary little book here called Interview with the Giant. I highly recommend you check it out. You can get it on lulu.com. Interview with the Giant. This is a quote from his book. He said, "Despite the loss of their physical bodies from dying in the flood, there is reason to believe that the giants, spirits, continue to exist. In this state, they were and are demonic entities. Like other sentient creatures, they have an eternal spirit at their essence. Therefore, the Nephilim and related tribes of giants never really ceased to exist. Only their physicality was lost." So if they're out there wandering around as disembodied spirits, they want a body back. Well, what if the creation of something God never intended to exist provides that opportunity? Because God created, Paul talks about that there's a spirit for man, there's a spirit for animals, there's a flesh for angels, a flesh for man, right? Paul talks about that. Well, God never created a provision for this. He never wanted it to exist. So what kind of spirit would enter that? I think it's a reasonable assumption to say the only spirit fit to enter that are the disembodied spirits that were corrupt to begin with. I believe that's plan B. If no other angel is going to risk the severity of the judgment, and they still wanted to mess with man, how are they going to do it? Plan B, mix animals with humans.